So today I'm going to talk about limiting a limited change, a low risk, relatively low risk change type that we can make, and we can control and measure using existing dashboards and existing KPIs. So in a typical situation where we decide we're going to do re-engineering, man, we go all in. Why? Because we're going to turn all those knobs at once because we only want to go through one test cycle. We only want to go through one change cycle, and we want to have meaningful impact, and it's the only way we can get in front of a bunch of people to get money, right? So typically it's, oh, we're going to change the business process. We're going to change the way we do business. We're going to change the way we interact with our customers. Oh, and we're going to change the underpinning systems to be a completely different tool set. We're going to change the architecture from a monolith to microservices to function-based to something else. I don't know what it is. There's got to be a buzzword this week, right? And we're going to do a tech change at the same time. You know, we used to be a Java shop, now we're C#, or we used to be a React shop, now we're going to do Flutter, right? Whatever it is. So in my mind, so you could argue that tech change is part of a system change, but what I'm going to say is a system change is where you change the calling pattern, right? We go from event-driven to web-based, those kinds of things. So if you think about it, why is our current system stable, right? And why is it relatively low risk the way it is, right? We have a bunch of key performance indicators and dashboards, hopefully, and measurements around that tell us how this existing system is behaving. We have contracts that exist between our system and other systems, or between us and a third party. You can do this at different levels of abstraction. We have a set of controls that tell us how we interact with that third party, or controls around how our systems operate. And we have, you might be a regulated industry, and so we need a certain level of controls around the requirements and SOX compliance or whatever else. And we have a set of tests that prove the system works whenever we make some incremental change. So if you look at the way this works, right? Like I said, I'm going to treat this as 3 axes. It's probably n axes, and some people would argue tech change isn't one of them. But a business change, right? That actually changes the key performance indicators. We're going to try and do something different. It changes the features that we have when we make a business change. When we do a system change, we change the contracts. We change from async to sync. We change from cloud to on-prem, or on-prem to cloud. Like, it would go one way, anyway. And then we got controls, right? Like, we have these controls around how the systems operate and how releases happen and who can see the data and all that kind of thing. So anytime we change anything on the system side or the business side, we create differences in the way those things operate, and then we create risk and reward. We balance that risk and reward. Typically, we only look at the reward and the expense, and we have all this complexity in what we're building, which creates a risk known and unknown. And I did that in a known knowns and a known unknowns talk. But let's talk about a tech change. And in that case, like, we could go from native mobile to Flutter, and that drops us from 2 user interfaces down to 1, or we could decide that we're changing from a closed source language to an open source language. It could be anything like that. So, but we're not going to do it in a system change. It's not like, oh, we've decided to change this language and we've decided to become all async, right? That's a meaningful decision that comes with its own risk and its own rewards. But if we think about doing a tech change, right, the thing is, we don't change the business requirements. So in theory, what we should be able to do is keep the existing systems as bug compatible as possible. The defects shouldn't change. The KPIs shouldn't change. The features don't change. The tests don't change. The contracts don't change. The controls don't change. So if you could keep your hands out of the cookie jar, you could do a tech change. And you would be able to use a technology that you could take into the future. And the theory is that would be a relatively low risk change. Now, because it doesn't have a huge business impact, or it doesn't have a big system impact, some people will argue this should never be done. But there are cases where you would do this, right? You've decided, Flutter's a good example. We're not going to do native mobile apps on Android and iOS. We're going to do Flutter, and we only need one technology, but we're going to not change the way that interacts with the back-end systems. We're not going to change business functionality in it. And then we're going to change all that later, right? And so that's 2 different strategies. One is pushing this thing up and to the left, making more differences, taking on larger reward and larger risk. You can end up with a black swan project, or you can be years fixing stuff, or end up in regulatory, whatever it is, right? You can do that. And the other option is this tech change. And why am I doing this? Because a lot of times it'll come up, hey, we've already got an existing application or two in the case of mobile, and why would we make this platform change when we've got something to work? And there is risk, right? We're going to re-implement something in another technology, but rather than completely re-engineering it, you could do it incrementally or big bang potentially. You could do it just as a tech change, keep the KPIs, right? A lot of times when we do re-engineering, the KPIs are like the last thing, or they're like something we use to justify what we're doing, but it really doesn't come up in the build. If we're only doing a tech change, then the existing KPI dashboards and controls should still work. And if they don't, we're just going to plug into the same places, and so those numbers should line up. And that actually reduces the risk. And then we could come back later and add business change now that we've re-teched, right? But like I said, you really got to watch the difference between a tech platform change and a system change, because a system change involves changing the way things operate, whereas the other, we're going to keep it as close to the same as possible. That gets rid of things like anti-corruption layers and what do you call them? And contract differences, right? Schema differences, those kinds of things. Anyway, so I'm making the case for just a plain tech change is something that you can manage, and there are going to be a whole bunch of people that say it's not worth it. But there are cases where it might actually be the safest approach that keeps you within the guardrails provided by your KPIs. Have a great day.